Hello, everybody. Dear audience, dear organizers of this important conference, I am very honored by the invitation to come and present for you, and I am delighted to share some of my results from my research with you today. They are connecting rather well to the theme of career guidance in a changing world. So I am very delighted to be here, and I will also tell you a little bit about myself, only shortly. Who am I? I am Ingela Bergmo Prvulovic, and I work as a senior lecturer at the Stockholm University in Sweden. So there I teach at the Career Guidance and Counseling program, and also on the foundational level and the master level. And I have also a lot of research interests spanning over multidisciplinary fields. So I'm interested in career guidance and counseling, as well as the human resource development areas, alongside with the adult learning and education fields. So I think it will be a very interesting conference to share all your knowledge together with me when we can discuss later on. So I look forward to it. So what am I going to talk about? I am going to talk about this, conflicting perspectives on career in a changing world of working life. And I will also try to draw out some implications for career guidance. I will think that it will be also good to draw out career as a bridging object between different fields and parties involved. And I will try to illustrate that during this presentation. So where to start then? Well, let's start with the word change. This seems to be the fundamental word. And when we look at it, this might be a familiar situation. We all want changes for the better, but sometimes when we are obliged to change, perhaps it's not that easy. So we are sometimes, when we are experiencing changes, we might add some resistance to them. And this is also something that I think we need to keep in mind when we meet our clients, when they are facing changes. Some of them are voluntarily changes, but some of them are also involuntary. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And we need to think of it when we are in this massive transformation of working life, where career contexts are changing alongside with political agendas as well. So we need to keep this in mind. And if we add the chaos theory to this project, an approach informed by career theory would say that even very small changes in the functioning of complex systems have the potential to result in a total transformation of the system. And why am I adding this one? Well, I think that an approach informed by this chaos theory would argue that even very small changes in the organization for work and in the ways we are speaking about work and career might result in a total transformation of the career system as well. And this is something that I think is important, because we need to observe all these small changes and add them to this career system. And let me show you some example of this. More than 2 decades ago, in response to those several changes in the world of work related to globalization processes and the transformation of working life and the world of work, many researchers started to explore what these changes would add to the career field. And as such, one of these messages was formulated by Douglas T. Hall, And as you can see, the career is dead. Long live the career. And this paradoxical message left me no rest, because at this point, career and career guidance received renewed attention as never been seen before. I was puzzled about this. How can a phenomenon be stated as dead, while at the same time be expressed as long live the career? So this was the starting point for me and my interest to focus on career, and made me do several studies to explore this. And one can assume that with such a statement, we entered a phase where different trends and the rise of the use of certain terms all contributed to the reshaping of career contexts, as well as the transformation and attempts to empty the former meaning of career and refill the concept and the phenomena with a new meaning. So we can assume that something new will arise. And the question is, how and what will this be? So in order to understand the reshaping of career context, there's also a need to pay attention to what has been occurred in the world of work the past decades. And we can see that there are new ways of organizing work. We have changes from stable structures to unstable structures. We have changes in employment organization where we are less lifelong employed. We have project employments and a lot of flexibility. We have a lot of uncertainty in the world of work today than we had before. So we also need to keep in mind that the very concept of career has its origins in a previous working life with previous working conditions than we have today. So career is in foundation in more hierarchical structures of the organization of work than we have today. Then we have all these strategies in the world of work where we can easily see the strategies of lifelong learning, of validation strategies where we are about to validate informal and non-formal competences. We have skills provision strategies and so on, alongside with a dominant individualization discourse. All these strategies can be seen as reactions on such uncertainty that we are observing in the world of work. So we have changes in ways of speaking. We have changing ways of organizing work and changing practices as well. So we have what I believe is a new language of career, influenced also by neoliberal framework, where we easily can find words like flexibility, adaptation, employability, and so on. These words are very present in policy strategies influenced by a neoliberal framework. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. And these challenges all challenge our everyday knowledge and what we, until this stage and this era, have taken for granted, and especially our clients who are perhaps not informed about this transformation of career context. So when the rules of the game are rearranged while we are playing, how do people know how to play the game? And how do we know how to support them in this game? This is something I think is necessary for us to reflect upon. And one way to understand these changes and working life transformation and how these will influence and have impact on different areas and contexts, as well as they will most certainly influence people's lives and their career-related issues. is to regard career as a bridging object. And with this, we can gain a deeper understanding of the relationship between education, work, and careers. So I will try to illustrate how I see career as a bridging object. And I draw upon a theory called social representation theory. And this theory focuses on how different subjects and groups create a collective idea of a certain object to reach a common understanding in a shared and social constructed reality. So I regard career as a bridging object, both in the specific encounter between the individual and the guidance counselor, and also a bridging object in the complex relationship between the parties in the field of education, work environments, and the labor market. So we are all sharing the interest in career-related issues, however, from different perspectives. So first, career function as the bridging object between the client and the counselor, as illustrated here. This occurs in the context of the societal structure where we have all these trends and politics and economics going on. Both the client and the counselor carry their own values and experience shaped in their own context, and this leads them to think about career in specific ways. And they have these into the guidance sessions. The encounter is then carried out in a societal context. So since adults in workplaces are experiencing increasing work-related career issues as consequences of these changes we have been talking about, such issues are raised more frequently in guidance counseling as well, because adults bring their perspectives on career, which has been shaped by organizational context in change that they have experienced, into the guidance meeting. And here, the client's perspective meets that of the guidance counselor, a perspective of career that has been professionally formed. Excuse me. So secondly, the context surrounding career as a bridging object can also be understood as a social and professional fields, in which each field is a context for actors, strategies and struggles and competition, where perspectives on career ideas are created in certain discourses in each field, and these might be in tension with one another. So this is my starting point into my research questions. And I believe then that there are two educational fields that are becoming intertwined with each other because of this career bridging object. And one field is the educational field of career guidance, and the other is the field of education and training in working life, where we have all these human resource strategies going on. And this is something that is in a meeting between the guidance counselor and the client. My research question to several studies was this. In an era of rapid changes in working life, what meaning is ascribed to career in European policy documents on guidance by adults who are affected by changing working life and by educational and vocational guidance counselors? And why am I interested in this? Well, my research question is anchored in my experiences from such encounters I earlier spoke about with adults in a guidance counseling center where I was working as a guidance counselor. I was puzzled by the many stories where several adults expressed a diffuse frustration that seemed to be anchored in their experiences from working life. They expressed feelings of not being appreciated or acknowledged. They expressed feelings that their competences were not optimally used. They expressed experiences of increasing workload without much of recognition, and demands on competence development and lack of possibilities to move further. They also had a lot of experiences from reorganizations and restructuring in their workplaces. Something was going on, and I became very interested in how can I understand this in a more deep way. I will give some overview of my results from the studies, and I will deepen some of the results with some quotations later on from one of the studies. So the first study explored European policy documents on career guidance. And my purpose here was to disclose the underlying meaning and perspectives on career in these documents and to find the additional message. I used qualitative method and made a sender-oriented interpretation. And what did I find out? Well, the analysis resulted in that the policymakers understood the term career and revealed that it was understood from three main ways. Firstly, from an economic perspective, as a response to market forces. Secondly, in relation to learning, emphasizing adaptation and readjustment rather than personal growth. And thirdly, in relation to individuals, self-management and autonomy. The underlying perspective that I found on career communicate an additional message that lead career to be subordinated to market forces. Then I made the second study, and this was a deepened investigation where I turned to ethical declaration documents for guidance professions. And I made a comparison between previous and existing declarations. This is the Swedish declarations I shall mention that I explored. And to analyze the significance of the core meaning of career at a structural level for career guidance practices, what will this bring to them? And I then made a receiver-oriented presentation. What I found here was that it was obvious that an implicit shift has taken place on emphasis in the career guidance mission that clearly created an uncertainty if career guidance is meant to be for the individual or for the market. And then I made a third study among a group of adults affected by changes in working life. And I wanted to explore what taken for granted knowledge they had on career, what everyday knowledge they had shaped and that guided their thoughts when they came into the career guidance sessions. And I tried to capture their spontaneous thoughts with a free association method. And they resulted in what I call two stable and two dynamic social representations of career. That is, shortly I can say that we can say that social representation is a kind of thinking system that guides you when you are talking about something you know and when you are practicing it. So people's everyday knowledge of career was clearly anchored in past working life condition and very clearly anchored in the traditional views of career. And these perspectives collided with the new experiences and perspectives they met in working life and new working life conditions. They also clearly state that career is a game of exchange. And I will deepen these results a little bit more in a second or two. The fourth study, I explored a group of guidance counselors and how they view both their mission and how they view career within their mission. So I also found several social representations here. And four social representations were clearly in an argumentative pairs of opposites, where the first pair was concerned with how they view their mission, and the second pair was how they view career within their mission. And something very interesting occurred because career guidance counselors revealed a very uneasy relationship to the concept career. They have difficulties in really explaining what they mean with career. And rather implicitly, they express it more like personal growth and life development. But it's only implicitly occurring. So this was my 4 studies. And let me show you some examples of the free association method among the adults who were producing these series. This is a typical example of how people think about career. We can see some words here: career, success, recognition, increasing status, salary growth, greater and more comprehensive responsibilities, continuing education and training, new challenges, and personal growth. We can clearly see that there are several examples connecting with traditional views of career. And they then produced a second series where we can see that career and salary growth is seen as a necessity, career recognition with prestige, and career and increasing status with traditional leadership. And several of these series were produced among these adults. And it was a very interesting analysis process. And these associations were analyzed and resulted in 4 social representations where those 2 are stable social representations, and this means that they are not subject to many reflections. They are taken for granted. These are fossilized representations and thinking system where we can see career as an individual project and self-realization, and a career as social and hierarchical climbing. And these are also very clear connected to, on the other hand, personal meaning, and on the other hand, social meaning. So we have personal and social meaning here. Then we have also 2 more dynamic social representation, dynamic thinking systems that clearly reveal that they are struggling with opposites in their thinking. So we can see that we have career as a game of exchange with a lot of opposites thinking, where we can see that they think about investing something, expected effort, and then they expect some certain outcome. And here, very clearly, is education one of these investments, when they clearly expect some kind of outcome after their education. Internal reward and external reward are also struggling them, whether they are satisfied inside or whether they are expecting some kind of rewards from outside. And then we have an interesting system of thoughts: created outcomes or offered outcomes, especially in an era where we are talking about individualization discourse, where you make your own career, you are responsible for yourself about your career. While on the other hand, in the game of exchange, they think that they are offered a career from workplaces. They can't control it themselves. So this is a very interesting result. Then they also struggle with individual assessment of value and social assessment of values, and whether the career should be beneficial for themselves or for the organization, and so on. We have also another social representation where career is an uncertain outcome. So this game of exchange appears to be more uncertain than before. And there we see a lot of thinking in opposites as well, where we can see security, insecurity, powerlessness is very expressed here. I shall only shortly show you some results here. You can see these quotations where they are clearly connected to personal and social meanings of career. And these are very stable. And then we have the more dynamic representations. And here they are very puzzled and discussing with themselves. So I can show you these later. I think they will be saved or something, so you can look at these more deep if you want to. But where does these results leave us? We have also how do guidance counselors handle career? And as we see here, we can find two representations of career among career guidance counselors, where they, on the other hand, think that the common view of career is something bad, and career in the context of guidance as something other than the common view. But they do not clearly express what they mean with career. Rather implicitly, they say, when you look implicitly in their expressions, you can find personal growth and life development expressed when they are talking about the mission. But on a direct question on what do you mean with career, this is the result. So when we then are discussing the results, where do we end up? We end up with a picture where career as a bridging object framed by conflicting perspectives. So the results of the European policy documents reveal the perspective of organizational and business needs, purposes, and goals. And career then emerges as a strategy, and then also a resource as a means of achieving organizational goals. This is one perspective that emerges. Another perspective is that of people, those we meet, and their everyday knowledge of career. And these knowledges are anchored in past working life condition, and they are trying to handling these new ways in working life. And they also think about career as this game of exchange when they are at workplaces. And this is clearly an involving interplay between both personal and social meaning. It is not an issue of either or. It's, okay, thank you. It's an issue of both and, both personal and social meaning. And then we have the perspective of career guidance community. And this issue of career is professionally formed with a focus on the individual, and career is implicitly expressed as personal growth and life development. And then we have this difficulty, because as outlined in this illustration, the bridging object really illustrate that career in some way is a relational task with parties involved with interest in career issues. But the responsibility issue is a problem, because to accord the individual with the sole responsibility for managing their own careers, keeping themselves flexible, constantly updated and competent, this will have consequences because it implicitly legitimizes other parties involved in evading their responsibility for supporting individuals' careers in working contexts. So we have to keep this in mind. And there seem to arise issues of injustice in workplaces. And this issue of social justice is something that we can read more about in a forthcoming book. And I will tell you a little bit more about that when I end up here, and I think that also our colleagues will tell more about this. But social justice is something we need to have a look at. And given this exploration, we can see that this will have implications for also social justice and how we see social justice when we see career from these perspectives. So, in the first perspective, the actors located in the field of business and organizations, this will bring that the individual is seen as a means to achieve other goals, while at the perspective among adults in workplaces, we can see that they raise issues of social injustice that they experience in workplaces. So this is something that needs to be further explored and something that we need to pay attention to. And in the perspective of career guidance community, we have the individual rather seen as the goal, as the end itself. So we end up with conflicting perspectives on both career and social justice here. So we have to keep that in mind. And one explanation for this might be that we have two perspectives that we can add on the human resource field, where on the one hand we have an exclusive focus on the organizational needs and their use, and on the other hand the relational and mutual exchange perspective. And this is something that also needs to be addressed. We have new ways of speaking about career and a language of influenced and underpinned by neoliberal agendas. A market-oriented logic, and how do we deal with it? This is some reflections. When we see career as a bridging object, we have to pay attention to this individualization discourse. Is the individual the sole responsible for career, or shall we see this as a shared responsibility among parties involved, where each part has a function and responsibility to fulfill? So we end up with a tension between the market logic of management, where individual is seen as the means, and the professional logic of career guidance, where the individual is seen as the goal. So here's a tension. And we also need to pay attention to the risk of the career guidance professions being a subject to marketization, where we have to pay attention to this. So this is something that I wanted to share with you. And this is the forthcoming book in which you can read more about this that I have been spoken about today. And one of the chapters I have written, and the book is co-edited by Ronald Sultana and Tristram Hooley and Ria Thompson. And I think this will be a very good contribution to the discussion. So thank you for listening, and thank you so much.